Welcome back to Leadership Training Camp. In this lesson, I'd like to talk about the topic, it's the culture. Stupid. Now, don't be offended by that. I'm just making a point. You know, very often in business, we say, hey, we've got to change people's behaviors a little bit. They've gotten a little slow, we're a little behind, we need more urgency, so let's change the goal. You know, let's change the forecast. And one of the things we have to remember is you don't change behaviors in an organization by changing the vision or by changing the goal. You change behaviors in an organization by changing the culture. And this is one of a leader's prime responsibilities, creating the culture that determines the behaviors that then brings on the results. In fact, think about this. This is a very important principle. Culture dictates behaviors. That's important. Culture dictates behaviors. In other words, if you want to get different behaviors in an organization, you've got to go to work on the culture first. Think of culture as your foundation. It's a good metaphor, actually. If an architect were going to build a skyscraper, he'd have to put it on the right foundation. If you try to build this grand structure on a foundation filled with cracks or holes, or that it's shifted over onto the sand, you're not going to be able to go very high. It's the same in business. Before you can go higher, you've got to get stronger down here. Whenever you want to improve your organization, you always go back to the foundation. And let me tell you something else about culture. It's never done. It's never finished. Hey, culture is like a garden. I mean, a garden's never finished. You have to pay constant attention to it. That garden, you have to weed it and seed it and feed it, and if you take your eyes off of it for very long, the weeds and the bugs are going to hijack the garden. Well, your business culture is the same way. If you're not continually putting words and mindsets in there like earn and deserve and consistency, you're going to get things like fault and blame and entitlement, and it's going to start to hijack your culture as well. Now, as the leader, whether you're running an entire organization or a department, it doesn't matter. You are the chief architect and primary influencer of that culture. You've got to shape that culture in your image, with your values, with your standards, because if you don't shape it, it's still going to get shaped. You can't not have a culture, but it's going to get shaped from the outside in by those things I just mentioned, things like a heightened sense of entitlement and you know, more fault, more blame. All these things you see going around in society today will start to infect your business culture. So think about this. Culture dictates behavior. If you want better behaviors, you've got to go to work on the foundation. In our next several clips, I'm actually going to be going over 5 pillars of culture to help you really understand what culture is. I'm going to give you 5 separate things to look at, get your hands around, start to shape, things you can roll up your sleeves and say, I'm going to go to work on that foundation in very specific areas. And as you begin to work on those areas, you'll strengthen the foundation so you can build a greater business on top of it. By the way, there's another important thing to remember. Remember I said culture dictates behaviors. Well, the next part of that principle is simply behaviors determine results. Behaviors determine results. And so if culture dictates behaviors and behaviors determine results, that makes getting that culture right pretty darn important. And you can understand why we're going to spend several clips talking about how to do that. By the way, you may be wondering what exactly I mean when I say culture dictates behavior. That's a principle, and you get to see it in play just about anywhere you go. If you walk into a church or a temple or a mosque, people behave a certain way in there, don't they? Sure they do. Why is that? It's a result of the culture. If you go into a library or a museum, it's the same thing. People act a certain way in those places because there's a certain culture there. Now, if you go to a nightclub, it's a totally different type of behavior because you've got a different culture there. I think you'd agree that people act differently in a nightclub than they do in a library. If they don't, then you probably need to find a more fun place to go. If you go to a ball game, it's the same thing. That culture in that ball game is going to have a different type of behavior than it is in the church. And so what this means to you is, however people are behaving on a day in, day out basis in your business is a result of the culture you've created. And if you want to improve those behaviors, you've got to go to work on that culture. You've got to go to work on the 5 things I'm going to share with you. One of the big mistakes managers make is running around trying to change behaviors without changing the culture in which it's found. And it just doesn't stick, it doesn't last. That's why I said early on in this lesson, you don't change behaviors by changing the vision. Now, if you already have a strong culture, then a new vision can focus, enhance, and accelerate behaviors. It's not going to change them per se. And so understand this is your responsibility. Culture is your report card. And in the next several lessons, I'm going to give you 5 particular pillars to go and to work on to strengthen that foundation so you can improve your results. We'll talk again real soon in the next lesson.